What you want more than anything is you want to meet people with different experiences. And I've always sort of found you would see things that you would not automatically have come across.
Hello, and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that puts leadership in its sights. I'm Jonathan White, and in each episode I'm joined by directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the leader of the opposition, whoever that might be in a couple of weeks. The aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We discuss everything from the latest worldwide trade concerns to the law of diminishing returns, and of course the innovation and success in the country that make it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current political and economic state of the country. Later on in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Pickles, former Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Chairman of the Conservative Party, and of course the current co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But for now, we're joined by Dr. Katherine Alexander, the Director of Highgate Hill Solicitors in London. Katherine founded the firm in 2002 and has spent much time working to ensure that the Solicitors Regulation Authority protects small ethnic minority firms which make up an important part of the UK's multi-ethnic society. Having a distinguished career in both Cyprus and Britain, Katherine and I discuss her work, the challenges facing the sector, and the reforms she thinks are necessary going forward. Katherine, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this podcast.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for joining. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Yes.
I thought it might be best is to start to kick things off, as it were. What is it, first of all, Kathy, that you set out to do when you established Highgate Hill Solicitors now in 2002?
Yes. We were established in 2002 in the neighborhood here at Whitehall Park. It's a very lovely area, leafy, etc. And we have started doing a lot of work with the community. We have also a charitable side of it. Every Saturday afternoon, we allow pensioners to come in and ask us questions which are of interest to them, or free consultation. We also organize,
go ahead.
various other evenings. But the business of,
No, go ahead, sorry.
The business of the firm started with ordinary property conveyancing. I was doing also some shipping as well, as I'm connected with a mainland Greek firm, and I was representing them in London. But suddenly, there were a lot of people who visited us complaining about the fact that they bought holiday properties abroad and they invested some money and they lost the money. And therefore we entered into the so-called group litigation processes, which meant that we had to fight bilateral cases. That some of the actions were determined here at the English Commercial High Court, and a lot of actions were determined at the courts of Cyprus, sometimes in Greece. And we had to share our time between Cyprus and England continuously. It is a horrendous action, actually, which lasted 10 years.
Gosh.
But we managed to win these actions here and in Cyprus. In Cyprus, we had to fight against 400 writs. It affected mainly British people who bought properties in Cyprus, middle class and lower middle class people, but we managed to overcome the writs, and therefore the bank as well as the developer were ready to negotiate or to close the books, as we say. So we are in the final stages now of all these situations. We have already signed agreements with the banks in Cyprus for the loans, and they let us go away with a drop hands almost offers, which is very good for my clients. And we are now the last stage to deal with the various developers in these cases, asking them to pay back the deposits and reasonable legal costs to the clients. So we are at this stage. But in the process of all these litigation, there has been hard actions by competitors. There have been divisions within the group leading to various allegations, accusations, complaints, and everything that I had to face myself. There has been some kind of prejudice, being Cypriot myself, and they were losing their money in Cyprus. And I've been through a very difficult time for 10 years. And despite all that, I decided to fight on because I believed that I would get them out and they will be very happy at the end, which they were.
Well,
the letters that they sent to me.
Hey, congratulations, and obviously good luck for the future, because anyone involved with this before, Kathy, will know just how complicated and time-consuming it is. And I know, obviously, it's been a few months since you penned a piece for the review, but I know anyone or the listeners will know that you are do have a fair amount to say about the problems with the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority.
Yes,
I think,
a lot of problems.
Yes, I think let's address those head on now. I think
definitely, I would like to address it. But as soon as I won the jurisdiction in London for about 500 clients, and there was a lot of publicity. There was a competition from various firms who thought that probably I made a lot of money, etc., which is not the case, because my clients were not the rich class of people. They were just misled to buy properties for investment without knowing what property business is or having the money. So immediately they started creating websites and creating webinars in order to attract the clients away. In order to attract the clients away, they had to speak against me. When we were given the offers from the bank in order to settle, which would be better for the clients, they were persuading the clients not to accept the offer, not to negotiate, but to continue fighting. And also, they were advising them that I was cooperating with the bank, etc., which was not true. A lot of these clients were persuaded to complain to the SRA, to complain to the legal ombudsman, everywhere, because they were told to complain there. They were encouraged that if they complain and they win their complaints, they would impose fines against me and that my insurance would pay all this. And in the middle of fighting actions for their benefit, both in Cyprus and in England, I had also to reply to continuous investigations and horrendous incidents that were happening with the SRA at one stage taking me to the court to surrender my files, having all these ombudsmen writing to me by an organized group of people organized by the opposition. We discovered later that this particular competitor had webinars with allegations against me, etc. Any other person would have left the case and walked away, but I didn't. I was working free, never charged my clients. There are plenty of witnesses who will speak about this, including the chair of the group and the other chairs, and they will say to everybody that I worked something like 20 hours a day in order to defeat any allegations and also to continue my actions at the Commercial High Court and also in Cyprus against 400 writs. I was traveling almost every week to Cyprus to go to the court here, there, and to come back here. Now, all these allegations were tortures. They were imposing a great deal of pressure on me. And whatever I was saying myself, it was not believed, because the competitors got a lot of people to write against me without their wish, because some of these people came back apologizing, etc. And the investigations that they carried out were completely different from any investigation I have seen in my whole life. As a member of the bar in Cyprus, if somebody alleges any misdemeanor or misconduct against me, then there will be a committee of 3 to 4 people appointed who would invite both sides face to face to explore what is going on and whether there could be a reconciliation or whether there is any real allegation against the person accused. So this was not happening here.
So very much a lack of
dropping into the.
So very much a lack of transparency on that front.
No, there was no transparency whatsoever. I have many letters which I tend to write a book about this, because this case I have been suggested by many newspapers to write a book about this because, as one of the journalists who visited me said, I have been the only one winning all the cases and bringing a resolution, and yet I had a far greater number of people trying to get at me because of personal profit-making reasons. So they were encouraging clients not to comply, not to pay the cost of the barristers, and if we were asking them to do so, they would turn and complain against us to the SRA, so Social Regulation Authority, and also. But they were having a strong statements signed by people. They had allegations raised by showing on the website to the SRA. At one stage, members of the SRA visited their firm in which this competitor was working without the knowledge of the firm itself, and they looked at slides supposed to be from people accusing me of various bad things, which I never did.
So it's an exceptionally frustrating situation. But I think,
yes.
And we could go on. But I think looking at it, stepping back and looking at it more broadly, because I'm sure you will have plenty of ideas, Kathy. I know you do. How would you like to see the system, especially the SRA, reformed for the future?
Yes. What I would like to see is that they should be, both SRA and the Ombudsman should be more transparent. If they get a letter from any client, it would be a good idea, as in the case of the Cyprus situation, to bring together the accuser together with the accused and both sides to state their case openly. They don't even tell you what the details of the accusations are. They don't explain what the details of the accusations are. You just say to you, this person made a complaint against you, coming to investigate. Similarly, the Ombudsman as well. That this person made a complaint and therefore he come to investigate. To investigate what? This is it. They never tell you what letters passed on, what communications they had with the other side. Nothing. And therefore, a person is left in the dark trying to find a way out of all these problems. And it's not fair. Whereas in Cyprus, which is a small country, a tiny little country compared to UK, and the legal system has been set, obviously, on the basis of the common law, but the country has been independent since 1959. They developed a very fair and transparent system where everybody could hear what that person is accused of. And then the accused lawyer would reply back, explaining whether it's true and documentation should be shown. You do not know what is happening in the background. So it's like the unknown. You don't have the court of laws to prove the truth by both sides speaking out and producing their evidence. On the contrary, it happens with the regulatory bodies. Nothing.
Absolutely.
There are books and books. Yeah.
And I think it's a great start for reform. And I'm sure, Kathy, if anyone can write a book, it's going to be you about it. Now, but we must, because I know we could spend the next half hour talking about this, but we mustn't. Yes. So I would like to just address, actually, Kathy, you've always been a big advocate of ethnic minority firms over the years. Yes. Now, and a lot of people, I think, even in the sector, might not be particularly familiar with the challenges they face. What is it they do face particularly difficult, and what can be done to help them?
Yes, we, as an ethnic minority legal firm myself, I have a lot of ethnic minority clients in addition to the groups. The problem that ethnic minorities face is that most of them, especially now, they are afraid of what is going on around them. They don't understand what is happening with Brexit or Brexit. Also, when it comes to litigation, they don't understand what is happening at the English courts. So, for example, I receive a lot of Kurdish clients, a lot of other ethnic minorities who do not understand the legal English system. So when they receive a letter from a police or a letter from somebody accusing them of something, they get terrorized.
It's been concerning, yes.
Yes, very much so. They're coming over here and they sit any time they want. They could take 1 or 2 hours. We charge, if we have to get paid, we charge only the cost of what it costs to lay an application to the court, but nothing more. And I have got also refugees coming to me and asylum seekers. I have a letter from a refugee committee in Islington, which is Jeremy Corbyn's seat, in which the refugee committee thanks me for all the work I have done over the years, lengthy years, for them to assist them. I spoke at public meetings at the town hall relating to students, for example. We have a lot of students who learn English in order to get to the universities. They are on short-term visas over only 11 months. So the course is not finishing. They have to return back to the country to apply from a country where they came in order to wait another 3 months before they reach this country again. And this is very unfair. These students, as a matter of fact, they are not allowed to work even a small Saturday job. They are not allowed to have any free medical treatment on the National Health Service. They have to pay for it themselves. And I've got quite a good number of these people that we're trying to assist as much as possible, assisting them with their visas. Sometimes they have problems, like, for example, last week, somebody had a very serious tooth infection. He didn't have any money. He couldn't go on National Health Service, and you had to give him money to go and see somebody in Belsize Park to do the teeth as soon as possible. So they face all these problems. Then you've got the ethnic minorities being established in this country, and they come to ethnic minority lawyers because we are cheap. We don't overprice them. Not only me, but a lot of us in the ethnic minority communities. But the ethnic minority firms now have enormous problems. As you probably know, from these years, the indemnity insurance have increased so much that a lot of firms found it difficult to pay their insurance, and they are closing down. My personal insurance this year, and I'm a small firm, was £60,000 to be paid in 3 days, which I did. So all these problems and the ethnic minority firms, the way things are going now, we probably have no ethnic minority firms in about 5-6 years because we can't afford the cost. A lot of ethnic minorities haven't got a building of their own. So therefore they are renting buildings, they suffer increases every year, they're not allowed to exhibit in the way they want to exhibit. So their whole work is frustrated. And by frustrating the work of the ethnic minorities, one frustrates the work for the ethnic minorities, because you've got, especially in London, a very large number of people coming from the Middle East, South Mediterranean, everywhere, and most of these people do not speak the language in a way that they could understand the legal situation here. Sometimes they get terrorized when they go to the court. It happened that I went to the court with some of these people, and they didn't want to get in because they were extremely frightened. So the ethnic minority firms have a duty to assist these people because we understand them better.
And what would you like to see, Kathy, from what is it that government could do? And just putting Brexit aside, only because that's a completely other issue now, and we could go another 20 minutes on that. But putting that aside, what can government, and what would you like to see government do to help? Yes, the government should decide to appoint more judges from the ethnic minorities, including also women from the ethnic minorities. Because having a judge from the ethnic minorities, the ethnic minority communities feel that they've got somebody who knows of their problems up on the bench. Especially in the High Court. You don't see many ethnic minority judges in the High Court or a commercial court at all. So we've got to have a fair representation, and especially a fair representation of women from the ethnic minorities. That's one thing. The other thing that they could do is to support, for example, in the early school years, a lot of children go to the school, their English is not up to standard, especially now because of the refugees. But they should fund extra classes, the local authorities to be funded for it, in order to enable the kids to learn the English language better, to be able to study better in this country, and to be able to mix up with the English children much better. I'm running... Yes. So, without a doubt, I think that's absolutely so key. And I think as things stand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know it's about 6.5, 7 percent of all British judges are currently from an ethnic minority background, so very small, and that's only increased exactly. And you're quite right about the provision for those with English as a second language, or indeed without English at all, especially in the schools.
Especially in the schools, yes. Because in my earlier career, I was teaching classics. I was a school teacher myself, and Latin and Greek. And I have come across this situation, and I was devoting some of my time in the evening to stay behind to do as much as I could. But they need a lot of tuition. And also, sometimes it's good to get the parents sharing the class with the children. It helps a lot. Because if the mother at home speaks English better than she does now, and she understands the culture and community, it helps the children as well.
It's a very enriching process for not just the children, but the parents, and not just in terms of language.
Right. Exactly. But that is why there are supplementary schools. We, the ethnic minorities, have established supplementary language schools. For example, I run a Greek school here at the back of my office. And in these schools, we try to bring people to teach English to the schools, although the Greek kids are not as bad as some other kids in the English language, but we still do it. And we try to teach even the grandmothers, because the grandmothers are closer in these tight community families, closer to the children than even the parents, because both parents go out to work and they stay with their elderly grandmother at home. So we try to do as much as possible, and at meetings of the supplementary schools, we discuss it between ourselves, and we feel that the supplementary schools have got a lot to offer by organizing these themselves. But there is no funding for the supplementary schools. I found the school myself and drew some contributions from a parent, but there is no funding at all. You know, they can't even pay a teacher properly. And we've got very good qualified teachers who cannot work because of the money they are offered. So some sort of provision should be made through charities, through the national lottery, through everything. Encouragement is needed by the government, by the local authority, in order to give more attention to this. Because in London, there are millions, I could say, of ethnic minorities. They're growing up in this country. They are loyal citizens of this country. And they should be given the opportunity to know the English language well as their background language, because otherwise they would be ruthless people. If a person doesn't know where the grandparents come, they don't know their family history, their contacts, etc., you can't have them like that. It's like a tree with no roots. And I established myself the supplementary schools in Egypt. I was the first supplementary schools many years ago. And since then, we have quite a few supplementary schools, but some of them are closing down because there is not enough funding. Also, space. Most of the supplementary schools, they haven't got any space, and if we have spaces at the English schools, it's £35 an hour. So if one needs 8 hours, it's a lot of money to raise, etc. Imagine if one has to carry it every week.
Absolutely, and I know we hear that from so many different communities as well, and it's a point so worth bringing up. Now, I'm conscious of the time here, Kathy. I know that, and since you've already brought it up, I think it's inevitable we should talk about it. As you've said, Brexit has not only caused difficulties for a lot of people, but it's the uncertainty that has created such, and some people, a lot of problems. Not just, of course, in Britain, but across Europe. And I was wondering, Kathy, if you could tell us perhaps how that has affected clients, not just, of course, here, but in Cyprus and Greece as well.
Yes. I could speak very well about Cyprus because I'm dealing with a lot of people there.
Yes, please.
A lot of Cypriots living in this country, as you know. And a lot of Cypriots travel a lot. They go back to their country. Sometimes they're business people. They visit Europe, travel agents, shipping people, everything. They visit Europe continuously. So we had a large number of Cypriots going back to Cyprus, getting the Cypriot passport, which is a European passport, so that they will be able to travel without disruption to visit Europe if they want to visit because of their businesses. And they also see that the Brexit is something that they themselves would do not like, because we consider ourselves, since we entered the European Union 2004 as full members, as being Europeans. We also found out, speaking for Cyprus itself, we also find out by being members of the European Union, our position against a new invasion from Turkey has been lessened, and we feel more secure, particularly now that petrol and gas has been found in Cyprus, and the continuous disruption created by invasion of the Turkish fleet into the territorial waters of Cyprus. We found a great deal of support by the European Union. For example, there were 2 years ago French warships and an Italian warship in order to protect the South Mediterranean, which is a support that we very much needed, as we are a small and defenseless island. We don't have an organized army. We also found support somehow with the British bases, because it's a kind of security there. There is an army which is organized, and I'm sure if they see that there is another invasion, they will probably try to stop it, because they are also having their own concerns and interests. And there is a very large British community in Cyprus, about 96,000 people. Now, we are very... whether the people like it or not in this country, the situation with us, the Cypriots, we are against Brexit, because we feel like we would be disrupting our connections with Europe, which we found a great deal of support. I've been to the European Parliament many times myself, speaking about the missing persons from Cyprus, the 2,000 missing persons since the Turkish invasion. And every time I went there and I spoke, they were doing things. They were writing letters. They were putting pressure. So we found out that we have been served by the European Union. We have a lot of commercial support from the European Union as such. We've got security also from the European Union. Our economy has stabilized. We receive a lot of tourists from the European Union. There's a lot of Germans coming around Zigi and the village of Kalabazos, which are very beautiful villages, and they stay there, particularly educated people and archaeologists. We've got a lot of Polish people. Everyone from Europe comes to Cyprus, Bulgarians, Romanians, because it's very close and the climate is very fair and good. So as far as we're concerned in this community, I don't think many people would vote or would have supported the Brexit. We would like Britain to stay in the European Union, but of course it is the British people to decide.
And I can only speak on above those, Catherine, that know that no matter and who's to predict what will happen. You know, we're speaking in the midst of a general election, but if and when we leave the European Union, I'm sure the connection that's both familial and business-like with Cyprus will always continue. I'm afraid, Catherine, we have it's gone quickly, but we've reached the end of our time. I hope, perhaps, Catherine, it would be a pleasure if you could come back and we can speak again after the election and after the issue with Brexit.
I would like very much.
So, but for now, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed our chat with Katherine, and especially learning more about the challenges facing the sector and how the whole team at Highgate Hill Solicitors are continuing to raise standards. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, Eric Pickles. Lord Pickles served as Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government in David Cameron's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2018. Lord Pickles remains active as the United Kingdom's anti-corruption champion and the country's special envoy for post-Holocaust issues, as well as being a keen vexillologist. That's flags to you and me. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoy speaking to Eric. Here it is now. Eric, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Now, I'm sure you won't mind me reminding the listeners that you've been involved in politics, both local and national, for quite a number of decades. Indeed, before the days we were in the common market. Given your experience over those years, what thoughts have you had over the last few weeks and months about the current political situation the country finds itself in?
Situation is quite dire because we have a parliament that is by and large useless. It's like a bored teenager on a long drive. and it knows what it doesn't want, and it's so bored with Brexit, but it can't agree. So no matter what you put up, it's against it. Are you in favour of a referendum? No, I don't want that. Are you in favour of remaining within the single market? No, I don't want that. Are you in favour of... No, I don't want to do that, no. And are you in favour of leaving without a deal? No, we don't want to do that. So it's against everything, but there isn't enough votes to be in favour of something, and it could be by the time this podcast goes out that Boris has started on the process of the bill, because we'll be voting on that today. But even then, what people don't seem to understand, this is not the end of Brexit.
Right.
This is barely opening the door of Brexit. We've got years of negotiations about trade agreements, relationships with Europe, putting down pieces of legislation. We get our agriculture, our fisheries, our financial services into place. Brexit is going to go on and on and on and on. I'm sure we are.
Now, the question is, I should actually remind listeners that we are talking on the day that the second reading of the European Control Act will take place. So, as we speak, we don't quite know. As, well, perhaps like the government front bench, don't know what's going to happen. You compare Parliament to a petulant teenager. What do you do to a petulant teenager to sort it out? Is there a chance that it will see sense and push this through this bill without wrecking amendments? Is there a chance it will vote for its own for a general election? How do you see this playing out at the moment?
The sensible thing would be to put this deal through, because I've always been of the view a deal is better than no deal, because this is just the beginning. In order to start the process of Brexit, start the process of the United Kingdom taking over powers that it's not really exercised for 40-odd years, the smart thing is to get this thing through now. But in a way, it's not about Brexit itself. If there was a free vote, this deal would have gone through. Mrs May's deal would have gone through. But it's about politics. It's about a Labour Party that thinks it has a chance, trying to make the Prime Minister, whether it was Theresa May or Boris Johnson, look as though that they are in office but not in power, of delaying it as long as possible. There's a lot of talk about an election in the autumn, maybe back end of November, beginning of December, something for us to look forward to before Christmas. It's beginning to look less likely. It's beginning to look as though they might want to drag it into spring to get as far away as possible from the rather decisive moment that Boris came back with a deal. We have to remind ourselves that nobody thought he could deliver a deal, and it does quite shock them. And if you remember, all this process went through in order to ensure that we were left without a deal. When we have a deal, suddenly, oh no, it's not that kind of deal. We don't want that kind of deal. We want something different.
I think the vast majority of people in this country, whether Remain or Leave, now would be very satisfied for this to come to a amiable conclusion. And as you correctly just said, because when it does come to those in the opposition that claim to want this to end, and then introduce wrecking amendments that introduce new objections to it, the general public are getting quite frustrated.
But you've got to understand that quite a lot of people don't get beyond a small area within Westminster, sometimes cliche referred to as the Westminster bubble, and go back to their own patch. Now, by and large, everybody hates their MP, except when they're at home, doing the fairs, wandering around, helping people. So they, in a way, they're cosseted to that great, which I feel is coming as a tsunami of change.
You were, of course, MP for Brentwood for
25 years.
Absolutely. What would you? I mean, of course, you president there as well, despite being a proud Yorkshireman, obviously representing a good Essex seat. What would you say to your old constituents right now? You hang in there; it'll be all right.
Well, it's different when you're a member of Parliament because, you've got to kind of toe the government line a little bit. So one thing I've found now is I've got my weekend back and I say what I want. And I think I always say to our constituents is that it is pretty hopeless down there.
Excellent. Well, on that, I think, honest assessment, it's something I think the Parliamentary Review has always done quite well, talking frankly about problems, issues, and also not just good practice, but leadership.
Well, I always used to read it when I was a member of Parliament, because, what you want more than anything is you want to meet people with different experiences, and I've always sort of found it quite a kind of a chatty magazine, but also you would see things that you would not automatically have come across. I certainly have attended the receptions over the year, and it's amazing the things you kind of pick up.
And I think it's important to stress it's not because politicians are uninterested, because honestly, as you'll know more than anyone, it's an issue of time. And to be able to have a channel and a platform where you can keep communication lines between businesses, schools and policymakers is so exceptionally important.
I think so, and it's important that it's beholden to nobody. People, pay to be part of the publication, pay for to be members, and it's a way of not being beholden to government, not beholden to anything.
Now, you're echoing the words, of course, your fellow Chairman Lord Blunkett has said. What some might not know is that you started your political journey perhaps even further left than David Blunkett.
Oh, absolutely, I was a communist.
Now, what was it?
At the age of 14, I was bought the Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution, and I read it from cover to cover. I tried to read it a few years back, and I just couldn't follow anything.
Oh, so I was going to say perhaps you might know the minds of the show front bench better than they do themselves.
From my position when I first joined, I would regard them as recalcitrant running dogs of the capitalist system.
Now, what was it then that moved you from radical Marxists to running the only inner-city council controlled by the Conservatives in the 80s?
Well, I was very young, and I was fascinated by what was happening in what was then Czechoslovakia and Dubček, and the revolution that was taking place there inside communism, and the way in which he was repressed by Mr. Brezhnev, and the tanks and taking over. I was so angry. I'm 16, remember. I'm really angry. I thought, what's the most outrageous thing I can do? I will join the Conservative Party as a protest. And I kind of sticked around, and my family thought it was the funniest thing that ever happened to it. I was Eric the Tory. And
I think you announced this quite grandly as a grand protest.
I did indeed, but I kept going down, and it was an exciting time. People were developing the ideas of what the Conservative Party should be. Selsdon man, even Heath looked radical. We had different ideas, and it eventually clicked. And at some point, I became a Conservative, and that was 51 years ago. I think I'm definitely 100% a Tory now.
Through and through.
Through and through.
Although I do know the story. Most people might guess that a dynamo Conservative like yourself would have perhaps a portrait of Mr. Thatcher or Mr. Churchill in their office. But who is it that you have?
I had Che Guevara. I always had him over my left shoulder for visitors, and they always used to you see their eyes going up and thinking, who? I can't possibly be it. Someone asked me if it was Desi Arnaz. I thought it was married to Lucille Ball. But no, the reason I did that was to remind me and to remind my officials that without constant vigilance, the cigar-chomping commies would take over.
I'm sure David Blunkett was in the room to reply to that, actually. But in that long journey, you eventually ended up, of course, in 2010, doing something most Conservatives would never thought they would have to do. but in a coalition government with, of all people, the Liberal Democrats.
That's right.
Now, something I think perhaps today more than ever, people and our politics seems to be almost wholly determined on how we voted in a referendum 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the most normal thing would happen after something like that would be the country would come together, and if anything, we're more divided. I mean, I thought working in the coalition, I'm proud to have been part of that coalition. I'm proud to have worked alongside the Liberal Democrats, who I think realise that, like all minority partners in a coalition, they would suffer at the polls.
Do you think we've lost the ability recently as a people to work with those that we might disagree with on issues more than we used to?
I'm not sure that's right. I mean, you can see various members of the Conservative Party working closely with Liberal Democrats and Labour to defeat their own government, but it's not a thing I think I would want to encourage.
Quite. And I should remind listeners, we are recording this in Victoria, just over the road at Cardinal Place, a fantastic new development site which wouldn't have been there without some of your legislation. What was the proudest?
I personally approved it.
Absolutely. What was the proudest moment, you think, in serving Secretary for 5 years?
It's my actual proudest moment. We did a thing called Troubled Families, which was the first centre-right attempt to deal with poverty and to deal with difficult families that were causing a disproportionately large amount of call upon the state, and it was on the basis of tough love. It was on the basis of getting people into jobs. It was about dealing with the kind of the family as a whole, not just one or two individuals that were having a problem. And I'm pleased that it's continued.
And since, I should very much stress that since, of course, you're stepped down to being an MP, you do have your weekends back, but that's not to say you haven't remained very active and very busy. Of course, continues the government's anti-corruption champion, shone the harsh light of day over malpractice in the local government. Indeed, the Queen's speech we've just had includes some of your recommendations from 2016. I think a couple of things on that. First of all, are you surprised, I may imagine you may not be, at some of the backlash towards, in this country, introducing voter ID for voting?
It is absurd, and it's particularly absurd coming from the Labour Party, because it was largely Labour's vulnerability that got my interest in trying to do something about it. And it's a bit like saying, you're requiring people to show some ID, that this is suppressing voting. It's a bit like saying the post office is suppressing parcels because they demand to see some ID. I think they've got a bee into their bonnet that this is something like that goes in the state to repress it. It's not. It's about giving confidence to the system. Now, the Electoral Commission and foreign observers have warned us for such a long time that our electoral system is vulnerable. And it's to misquote John Major, we are really sort of old maids cycling to evensong and Warburn. Yeah, I mean, it's such a basic thing. It's an important thing. And it was kind of interesting in some of the trials. They did a focus group with a bunch of young Asian girls. And they said they thought the process of a photo ID would actually give them a greater confidence in the fairness of the system. I make all kinds of recommendations to stop postal vote harvesting, to stop various fraud taking place, to stop intimidation at counts, to stop intimidation outside polling stations.
And I think you referenced it earlier, the Westminster bubble. A lot of the places where this occurs and the places where this does go on are places where perhaps many members, many people in the press don't usually go to.
No, they don't. We saw a YouGov poll that said the overwhelming majority, well in the 60%, thought this idea was sensible.
Yeah, and I imagine you're quite proud that recommendation is in the speech.
Yes, I mean, I'm a bit frustrated they didn't do it sooner, but nevertheless, I'm very happy that they are doing it.
It's as if the government's time has been taken up by something else and we've not focused on anything domestic.
Absolutely.
But with a man, though, with his roots in local government, do you think, and how much you've worked with that report, especially looking at them carefully, how would you rate our current state of local municipal politics?
Local government's very good. I mean, local government, don't get me wrong, it's by and large corruption-free, and it does a remarkably good job. And it was, in truth, my worries about local government and that these measures were brought in. I don't believe the fraud is big enough to be able to take a parliamentary seat, but it is big enough to take a council. And if you are negligent, uncaring about the probity of the poll, you're likely to be equally negligent about the awarding of contracts to your friends. So it's all past that. But local government is a very enduring part of our constitution. I got a bit of stick because we had to take some money from them, but by and large they survive very well.
Excellent. Now, beyond obviously that work, you also, of course, the British envoy for post-Holocaust issues.
Yeah, sure.
It very dear to your heart. I know you've done some fantastic work recently, including with obviously former Shadow Chancellor from the Review, Ed Balls. Would you mind, if you could just let listeners know what projects you are working on with that and really the importance that has to so many communities around the country?
Well, I used to be very unpleasant about Ed Ball, and he used to be very unpleasant about me. But I found working with him remarkably easy, and we've not had a single row in 2 years, and by now we're beginning to be able to finish each other's sentences. We're building a memorial to the Holocaust next to Parliament with a learning centre below it, and the reason why the Prime Minister chose that site is that it was David Cameron, and he wanted to ensure that when people left the memorial, they would look and see Parliament and recognise that it was the last bastion against tyranny. But more important, to remind people who work in Parliament that the legislature has a choice. It can either protect its citizens or it can oppress its citizens. And we do know that it was a compliant legislature that brought in the Nuremberg laws. And at a time when there are parts of Europe that are seeking to rewrite their history and seeking to see themselves as only the victims of the Nazis, I'm determined that we should tell the truth in an unblinking way. We are, I suppose, at a critical crossroads when the last survivor is likely to be no longer with us within the next decade and a half. And at that point, we do know that history starts to be reassessed. I think it was Simon Sharma that talked about this. And he was referring to the French Revolution. And of course, most of the books written in the 1850s are the ones that have shaped our view of the French Revolution. But the difference is this, that slightly over 100 years ago, my grandfather Edgar grabbed hold of his Lee Enfield and walked out of a trench in the Somme and walked towards the Germans. And within a few minutes, most of the people he'd been brought up with, most of his friends were dead. Nobody doubts that he did that. But there's a whole industry out there that doubts that the Holocaust took place. So that's why it's important that we help frame that narrative.
And you reference as well, it's so important, especially at this time of history, so many years afterwards, that young people in schools get the correct education about it. How do we compare as a country in doing that compared to some of our European friends?
We I think, compare remarkably well, particularly because we've got a mixture of things. We ensure through the lessons of Auschwitz that 2 pupils from every secondary school go to Auschwitz each year, that they have a preliminary meeting, a visit and a wrap-up. we ensure that Holocaust Day is remembered in January. Now, I can remember starting that, or I'm not starting it, but being part of a foot soldier of people that put it together. And, it was like one man and a dog, but now it's quite a massive, it's a massive event. So I think we are quite good at remembering that. I think where we perhaps do need to have a wider understanding is beyond the death camps. And we need to kind of understand the Anstalt-Gruppen, which was the roving murder squads, how important they were. You were more likely to have been shot in a ditch than to end up in a death camp. The hinterland of that is Lithuania, where I was last week talking to colleagues, and through Belarus and the Ukraine. And it's really important that we ensure that we register where those death sites are.
And I think certainly, and I'm going to sit down next to speak, which hopefully won't be too long away. It's something I think we'd be very happy to keep updates on how that project is going, because it's so important and people do need to be aware of it. Looking to the future, though, I imagine you were actually very content and happy. The former Prime Minister, friend and colleague David Cameron just released his book, and you were quite unscathed from it.
I can't. He was very nice about it. I even bought the audio version because he was reading it, and he obviously, but there was a fair bit of affection, and I'm rather glad they left out one or two of the other embarrassing things.
Maybe another time.
Yeah.
But it's important, I think, and I'm conscious of the time. But I think it's important that today people have become so perhaps caught up in what's happening in this country regarding Brexit. Looking to the future, what would you say that it's a positive thing that this country has to look forward to?
Well, we're a large trading nation. We're a large economy. We're a liberal democracy, and it would be good to get through Brexit over the coming years. And it would be good to start to look at some of the social issues that we need to tackle. Those have been left behind by our economic progress. And it will be good to see some solid investment in this country, both in terms of its infrastructure, but also in terms of the way it operates as a democracy.
And I know there's going to be a huge focus of the next review. Pickles, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests. I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm after the crown and cushion to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube and Spotify. The views expressed by each guest in the podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry or any other guest on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.